everybody. Welcome to episode 21. We made it to Blackjack. The best thing is when we get to 22, I can just do random Sid Vicious quote. Only Chris will get that. Owen would, but Owen is busy with his beauty sleep, preparing for 8 o'clock in the morning tomorrow with the nominations. But in the middle of it, it's time to talk my selection of... Hang on. I've got to switch over. I've made a special screen. Docu-Sucker, a.k.a. Giulia Testa, a.k.a. Once Upon a Time in the Revolution, a.k.a. A Fistful of Dynamite, a.k.a. Why does this have so many titles? Sergio, you idiot. Hello, I'm your host and selector of the film for this time, Ashley. Joining us as ever is Chris.
Hello.
And AJ. So, I have an affection for this film mainly because it just fits in with apart from maybe the Colossus of Rhodes, it fits in with pretty much anything that Sergio's done, hence the naming of the titles. Fistful of Dynamite to try and tie it into the Dollars trilogy, but then you've got the Once Upon a Time tie-in with the sort of the West, the Revolution, and America, and then the sort of the postmodern Western in terms of Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Once Upon a Time in the West, and Docu-Sucker as well. It falls into too many.
Yeah, I'd always heard is essentially that he did 7 movies, obviously, and it was the first movie and then 2 trilogies, where it was the Dollars trilogy and then the Once Upon a Time trilogy. Even though Once Upon America kind of sticks out with the other Once Upon a Time movies.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember that show, Once Upon a Time, where the girl travels to the different fairy tale worlds?
Yeah.
I want that, but with this Once Upon a Time universe.
Brother, was this your first, I would say your first Leone Western. Is it just your first Leone movie in general?
Yeah.
I'm curious how you'd feel, because I mentioned before that this was my first time seeing this, even though I've owned it forever, because I have this Leone collection that has the Dollars trilogy, but then instead of Once Upon a Time in the West, because Once Upon a Time in the West is Paramount when these are MGM, they just put Docu-Sucker instead, and see it's you can see that they have that as the main title, but aka A Fistful of Dynamite is really tiny.
Well, because
and
it's what Sergio intended, because he thought that everybody in America said it. It was a common colloquialism. You know, they all say Docu-Sucker.
I did see there was a funny anecdote in Tarantino's new book where he talks about having seen most of the movies of this era in the theater, and they ended up not seeing Docu-Sucker just because his stepdad thought the title was stupid, so he didn't.
That's a shame.
Which is probably why it flopped at the box office like it did, and then they reissued it as A Fistful of Dynamite to go, look, it's got a title like you recognise. And it did slightly better, but underperformed from the off, to be fair. It even the whole thing apparently caused a massive fight between Leone and Peter Bogdanovich, just over the title, because Bogdanovich was adamant that it's a stupid title and it needs to be got rid of, and he stormed out of his house. He stormed out of Sergio's house because they sort of, it sort of nearly drove them apart like forever, just over one title. Maybe that's why he didn't make films for 12 years.
Yeah, because to my understanding, it was supposed to be Bogdanovich that had this, and then it changed hands to Peckinpah, which would have made sense. And then it was like some assistant before Leone finally said, "Fuck it, I'll do it."
Yeah,
Which is really funny because the very next year, The Getaway with Steve McQueen would go through the Bogdanovich Peckinpah line again. So something else I learned from Tarantino's book.
yeah, it was passed on from Peckinpah to, I think, like his assistant director. And Steiger and Coburn were like, we signed on for a Sergio Leone film. Why isn't he directing it? And Sergio was like, oh, okay.
So, brother, just getting your first taste of a Leone Western, can you already see where all the influences of like later movies comes from?
Yeah, it's pretty obvious.
When I did my video on the Dollars trilogy, one of the things I brought up, and I still feel this way, is the thing I love about Leone's Westerns is they're so sort of foundational and have such this old feeling about them. They feel like they've been around forever. Like Leone's Westerns feel like they're 100 years old when you're like looking at them, even though you see people that were alive in your lifetime, like Steiger and Coburn, and obviously Eastwood in the other movies. So that's something that's always kind of drawn me to them, and I could throw this one in there also.
If I didn't know beforehand it was Rod Steiger, it would have taken me an embarrassing long amount of time to realize it was.
Yeah. That's like Eli Wallach's kind of the same way in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
James Coburn, I knew right away it was James Coburn.
Even under that totally convincing Irish accent.
The grand, glorious hero of the revolution.
And I'm not usually the person that points out accents, but that I don't know if it's just because I'm so used to his regular voice, but it stood out. I think he's actually from like Nebraska or something.
What about Steiger's accent?
Yeah. Well, like you, I feel like he actually blended in surprisingly well.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I do feel like the voice is kind of a give, like the sound of his voice is still kind of a giveaway.
Mm-hmm.
Then again, of course, it sort of is in that style. It's very similar to Jewish Eli Wallach as Tuco, and then Bronson as Harmonica Man. They put on sort of the mock Mexican accents. Obviously, wouldn't sway today. Like a fair bit of things in this film, which it's weird because like nowadays we want it in to like preserve the original vision, but the irony is like the accosting and rape scene that happens early on got cut out of the original 70s release, mainly though because they were going for a PG-13 release, and that probably wouldn't have got by the censors, which is fair.
Yeah, I noticed it was funny how when the reason you chose this one was you were trying to choose a topical one back when Christmas was still happening, and you said since your pick didn't come around at Christmas, you chose this one instead. But yours is actually still, it felt topical still because from like new movies from 2022, we had a lot of sort of eat the rich movies, and the opening scene of this falls like right in line with that, where it shows like when we first see Steiger, he's almost like sort of submissive in a way when he first gets on the train, and we have these really high class rich people that are like really repulsive.
Yeah,
we get like the repulsive close-ups and everything.
Shots right into their mouth.
Yeah.
I think
And then
Leone
it's on
said
the
that he wanted to make it look like the most disgusting eating you've ever seen.
and then it's and when he starts to blow these people away, in kind of the fashion of most of the characters in Leone westerns, you're constantly asking who's a hero and who's a villain. Like that's always a gray area. Like throughout the whole movie, pretty much it's a gray area until the Colonel's finally introduced, and then it's a bit more black and white, but still pretty gray in a lot of places.
Yeah, I mean the whole aspect of the film, arguably, if you translate the original um, Italian title, I think it was like Gia Testa Coconut, which is basically keep your head down balls. Um, so they cropped the balls. They eunuch the title, I guess. And so it just became keep your head down. Keep out of trouble. And in essence, what you basically find here is Juan gets into trouble and ultimately pays for it in the end because he loses everything. And in that respect, it's sort of, I mean, he always intended it as a sort of political piece from what I looked into it. I mean, right from the start with the quote from Mao Zedong about revolution is sort of unnecessary, and he partly made it apparently as sort of a retort to the '68 Paris Revolution, in the sense of you can say a lot of things in a revolution, but does anything really change? And in that respect, that sort of carries on through the entire film. The message of, like, just because there's a new person in charge doesn't mean that they're any better or worse than whoever might be there. Um, everybody pretty much gets their comeuppance, bar one. John does. The not German but clearly German looking general does. The mayor of the town does. The doctor that's supposed to be the head of the revolution does. All the sort of Mexican troops that get killed. All the bandits that get killed. In everything. That sort of get sort of Holocaust-esque when you get to that scene of like the four sort of like valleys where everybody just being firing squadded into.
Yeah.
It's his least western, except
Yeah, I was gonna
it's
say,
more west. Confusingly, it's west. It's more westernized western than a traditional western.
yeah, because the thing that's usually appealing about westerns, which I've talked a lot about when I talked about the English, is it's a genre that's basically known for its simplicity usually, and then to like add all of this underneath it, and sometimes on top of it, both subtle and totally not subtle. Because this movie is massive. Like I've noticed a lot of the great thing, something, brother, I think you'll really love if you look into the other Leone westerns, is a lot of where this one was like really big and had a lot of action in it. The other Jesus, Leone westerns seem much more, especially the good, bad, and the ugly. Um, Seems much more focused on like the suspense and tension. Where there's like those scenes in Tarantino movies where they go on for a really long time, and you just know that like something's about to go off, and a lot of people are probably about to get shot.
The opening scene of Bastards.
Yeah, and the tavern scene in Bastards. and a lot of scenes in Django, and the entirety of the Hateful Eight. That's basically the kind of tension that the Dollars trilogy has, and Once Upon a Time in the West has. Whereas this one's almost a full blown action movie.
And keeping in that, I think we can officially indoctrinate this movie into the movies with badass train scenes club.
Yeah. I
Even
was
though
not
it was a
expecting this
model.
to have.
Even though it was a model. It wasn't a case of, no, we've got the budget, let's crash real trains into it. It's not a Nolan sort of deal. Like, we're going to get full-size trains and just plow them into each other.
Though there is the scene when it's when Coburn like first escapes, when they're riding on the train track, and then a train is just coming up from behind them, and they're just talking and don't even really realize it's coming. I'm assuming that train had to be real, right? Because the whole time I was watching that scene, I was like, okay, there's no way if they shot this scene today that wouldn't be a clear green screen. But I'm pretty sure a train is coming right at them, and they're just dialoguing.
Yeah.
That's not where I thought you were going to go with that thought. I thought you were going to ask if it was the fact that they didn't even recognize the train was like a metaphor for how they were going to end up or something.
Oh,
I thought you were going there with it.
They can't even see the impending disaster coming.
and then on a train, no less. And you're just like, the only thing you meant was, is that train real?
It's like, were they just like, you know what? We're just gonna like, there's not, because filming a scene like that, assuming the train's really coming up on them, there's not much room for error. It's just eventually they get to the point of, oh yeah, there's a train coming. Let's step to the side. Because I was thinking, even in like Stand By Me, when they're really far away from the train, you can still tell how green screen that scene is. But I'm pretty sure Leone was just like, you know what? There's not much room for error, but I trust them to step out of the way when it's time.
I mean, it seemed to, the train seemed to at least be going slow. It wasn't like going fast as it could have done.
Yeah, because the close-ups of it when they're saying like, you know, holy shit, there's guys on the track, they need to get them off. It looks like it's going fast, but when we see them, it's like it's just kind of creeping up a little bit on them.
It's like the roller in Austin Powers.
Or John Cleese running up to the castle in Holy Grail.
Yeah. So yeah, with the film starting with like the quote, which got cut out, and then the pissing on the ants, which some took as a sort of jab at Peckinpah because of the ant scorpion start, but apparently what it was basically just Leone's childhood, of which they would urinate on like a board, and whoever's stream made it down to the bottom of the board first won, and that's why it happened. That's why it's in there.
Once again, I thought you were going a different direction. I don't know why I'm thinking metaphorically, but I was thinking you were going to say that it was like a symbolism of like from above pissing down on the modern worker.
I mean, maybe. Hang on, I'll get the. I mean, I won't get the Ouija board out. Things happen with that.
Well, I just love the idea of taking this question to Leone and asking. He's just like, "No, we just pissed on ants as kids."
Yeah.
And that's
I
the
don't
end
think
of
it was
it.
ants. It was just like pissing on wood, and I guess the closest thing that one had at the time was like a tree stump, where the ants were doing the stuff.
Because I was still, because it did cross my mind where I was like, this is an interesting movie to just start with a stream of piss. Let's see where this goes. And it was the opening reminded me of the opening of Once Upon a Time in the West, when they're at the train station and they're just kind of doing mundane things and waiting.
Mm-hmm.
That's just kind of the vibe I got from
Yeah.
it. I love how we brought up so many different interpretations of just a stream of piss at the opening scene of this movie. That's the power of Leone, I suppose.
And then the coach comes through, which, I mean, the audio commentary from Sir Christopher Frayling that's on the special edition DVD, also the one that's in your set, AJ, as well as they carried it over to the Blu-ray release. That carriage, apparently Leone sort of collected carriages, and he knew like what a grand carriage would be like, so he actually had commissioned a full-on carriage with Louis Vuitton like bags and furniture, an actual working toilet, like this grand thing. And when they tried to put it into use, you could put like 12 horses on it and they couldn't pull it because it was that heavy. So some of the bits, it's basically made with like a balsa wood, light wood one for the action scenes. In other bits, what you don't see is it's being pushed from the back by a tractor.
Oh man, if that thing was a pain in the butt to move and get out there, Leone really blew that thing up, didn't he?
I mean, I'm guessing it didn't have. I'm guessing it didn't have the Louis Vuitton furniture in, or it might have been just the. Considering how it just really crumbled like tinderbox, I'm guessing it was probably the lightweight version that they blew up.
I wonder if that's ever come about on a movie set, like a director and the people on set are talking, and the director's like, "Man, that was a pain in the ass to get in here. How are we going to get it out?" And the screenplay writer's like, "I could write where it explodes," and the director's like, "Yep, work it in. We'll just blow it up."
Yeah, it's like it raises the question: did they really just blow up Bruce at the end of Jaws? They probably did.
They probably did that with Glee.
And
Spielberg probably like, "Let me hit the button myself."
While we're talking about the luxury items, can we just talk about how amazing that shot is? Where they like set up shop on that hill, where they have like the luxury chairs and the trunk is the table, and they're just having wine with like the desert in the background. I love that shot so much.
We may be bandits, but we're civilized some of the time. We take advantage of what we have. And then I guess it all went up when... I can't remember if it was still there by the time that John heads off on his bike and the bike gets destroyed and everything. Another little interesting tidbit is the first lines of the movie, that speech that, well, the pleas that Juan makes to the coachman, were the actual first things filmed. Which, I know how films usually work, and they don't normally have the first scene be the first thing filmed. Or the first dialogue. It sort of like jumps all over the place. And then to really sort of reflect how method Steiger was, Leone claimed that he walked like half a mile away and then walking back just to get into frame of mind. And Steiger was all about, you know, getting it done in a couple of takes and then moving on. Whereas Leone was basically Kubrick, and that he'd do 20 to 25 takes. But apparently his reasoning is he wanted sort of a withered performance. He didn't want Juan to be too sort of like clever and thinking on his feet. He has to be sort of like clever dumb, if that's a thing.
That actually really comes through. So
yeah. And Josie does bring it up, which I'll get to in a minute. Did
anybody else get the feeling through the movie that Juan was kind of John's Del Griffith for a while?
Only there was actually the possibility they would literally kill each other at any point.
Yes.
It was sort of like... It's sort of, to me, it's sort of akin actually to Sleuth, going back to the first one, in that each is sort of trying to one up the other gradually. You know, I'll put a hole in your bike tire, so I'll put a hole in your roof. I'll destroy your bike, so I'll destroy your carriage. And it's sort of,
Yeah, I loved watching the dynamic form because going into this pretty much blind, I did just kind of assume they were going to be enemies and that was going to be what the movie was. I had no idea there'd be like this begrudging partnership of sorts.
yeah, it and I do like the concept of, okay, it was impossible for the IRA to exist in 1913, which is supposedly when the film's set. Mainly because politically around that time, that's when Mexico was sort of right as the tinderbox to be the firecracker, if you will, to like set the grand part of the revolution going. But I'm trying to work out like whether the liquid that John uses in his demo stuff would actually be real. Because I don't think it was like nitroglycerin, but it was obviously something to akin to that. If one drop can basically cause like a foot deep, foot wide sort of pothole.
How funny is it that the next movie that we'll talk about that you pick also has liquid explosive?
I do love I love Coburn's line, "If I fall, they'll have to alter all the maps."
Which, considering like the scale of the explosion that he does when destroying the bridge, that has like nuclear bomb style fallout sort of shake the camera and fall backwards sort of. If that's what he
And
can
I
do
love
with
that we get a
regular
shot of the colonel
dynamite,
and it's literally just like a little bit of soot.
if that's what he can do with regular dynamite, what the hell is he going to do with the rest of the things in his flask? Jeez.
Yeah, I love how the soot and stuff like that. How some of it almost feels intentionally cartoonish. Like after the dude blows up and the only thing remaining is the brim of his hat. And it's like something right out of a Wile E. Coyote cartoon, and I feel like that has to be somewhat intentional.
And not only that, but it's picked up and used to tell a point. It makes sense though, because there for a while where like the colonel was trying to catch him, and then John would get him out. I mean, it was kind of like a Bugs Bunny Elmer Fudd.
and
Yeah, if Elmer Fudd was sadistic enough to poke holes in eggs and drink them like shot glasses, out of all the carnage, all the mass murder, all the genocide, that's the craziest thing the Colonel does in the whole movie. That's his Allison Williams and Get Out moment where she's eating the cereal and milk separately. That's his version of that.
And John's story is like interesting in itself. You know, going from his sort of happy days in Ireland, getting into sort of the IRA style, you know, not being happy with the British rule, leading to the culmination of the sort of the big scene, which has its reflections in sort of one story, and that the person that was the leader double crosses and causes all the people to get reported and whatever. And I guess they don't get killed in Ireland because John just does it with lucky number Slevin style, gets the paper over the shotgun and boom.
It felt very akin to when we got Bronson's backstory once upon a time in the West, where we get it like in just little bits and pieces throughout, and then the final reveal of the backstory kind of coincides with the climax itself, which is a technique that I really love.
Which that backstory, I think the only sort of like proper version is on the Blu-ray, because the Blu-ray is like 2 or 3 minutes longer than DVD, but I don't know whether that would be difference in sort of running time or whatever, you know, because of frames per second. I'm not sure. But the original version, as it was released, this one, is basically what was the original, thought to be the original cut, which completely loses the 3 to 4 minute final flashback with like the menage a trois thing. Because apparently the studio thought, well, if it's slow music like Morricone does, and it's this sort of like romance thing, people are just going to think it's the end of the film and walk out early. So on that original release, it sort of has Coburn sort of like reminiscing, and immediately cuts to Juan walking away, turning around, and he just goes, there's no sound on it. They cut the sound off. The explosion happens with no sound. And then he's looking at the explosion that keeps going on, and he looks at the camera and tilts his head, and nothing is said. And it just says, a fistful of dynamite, duck you sucker. that 4 minute, the 4 minute flashback scene with all the kissing and the snogging and everything, like, makes perfect sense, because it sort of explains, as you say, it sort of does the full arc, but it then explains why Coburn is looking at that while he's got his, you know, dynamite cigarette. That's just, and like some of the cuts as well. I get like with the rape thing that probably wouldn't be allowed in the UK, but apparently a load of the swearing was got rid of, and again, a plot point which I think is relatively important for John's character, the whole bit with the tower and bunking off the silver miner people, where John thinks it's actually Juan's family. That isn't in the original cut from like the 70s. They cut that out because they thought it wasn't necessary. So it just goes from sort of him being shot at his feet or whatever, and cut straight to them on the train line about to get run over by the train, sort of thing. That whole 4 or 5 minute sequence, gone.
I just love that this movie gave me the visual with the language, the visual of someone being carried away by a happy crowd of people yelling "fuck you" and flipping someone off. It's a great visual.
And the fact that that person is Rod Steiger also feels very appropriate.
That should have been the poster.
And that bit's as good as that bit's as good as well, because that's that midway through is him being the reluctant hero, and then when you get to later on when he has his personal vendetta for killing the governor or whatever it is, and then immediately sort of gets taken out of the train carriage and is considered a hero immediately, where he's much more accepting because he's got his sort of vengeance and whatever.
I appreciate that we didn't go down a rabbit hole of Juan like abusing that fame. We don't really get that from him. And it'd be something so easy that his character could have been set up to do, and they chose not to go that route. So I think that's commendable that they kind of nipped that cliche in the bud, and he just kind of accepts it over time.
Yeah, because as he says, as soon as as soon as the first revolution thing happens, you get that little meeting with him and John where he's like, I know how these work. People come in, people come out, nothing changes, like I said earlier. The only people that suffer is the peasants who probably die. And considering that's basically, my livelihood, I don't want any of that blood on my hands. The irony being, he sort of does get the blood on his hands because he's the one that tells everybody to go to the caves because it's safe there. Me and John will be a two-man army on this bridge. And in doing so, and that's another bit that was weird in the original, to try and get the pacing supposedly faster, the bit when Steiger is walking through the caves, they just have random 4-second shots of all the dead people. Whereas in the cut that I think is the better version of that scene, you just sort of linger on Steiger just reacting and you're wondering what's happened. And he sort of says, that, I've never had to count them before, my 6. And Coburn sort of is, they're waiting outside or whatever. And then it's only when Coburn goes in and we sort of see from his eye or viewpoint, panning across to see all the people that you saw earlier, and then as it eventually pans round to his family and his father and everything, and that I think is more powerful.
Yes, especially the way you can hear the gunfire in the background.
Yeah, Juan just doesn't care. He's just willing to sort of go down in a fight sort of thing, which then sort of moves relatively seamlessly into the tortured doctor basically snitching, and John getting his sort of flashback and realization of the actual human cost of all these things. I'm trying to see if there's anything. There was one outtake that I did notice that I want to bring up. The bank scene. Where, the gold is actually, political prisoners. I swear there is one bit, just as they open up the first vault of prisoners. If you look at the steps going from, the main thing to the vault, one of the Mexican troopers marches down the steps in plain view. Nobody's trying to shoot him. He could literally just if he had a gun, he'd just go bah, 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 and it'd be done. If you want to, I can't. It's within the first half because it pretty much, it's weird. Halfway through is pretty much when I goes fuck you. That's the hard half cut. That'd be where the interval would be, I guess. That'd be the interlude, as you got in Hateful Eight if you saw it in that version. That'd be beautiful. Fuck you. 10 minutes. Get your popcorn. And now back to the action.
I'm trying to remember if Tubi cut to an ad when he did that or not. I want to see it play on TV with the early 90s style where it's fuck you, and he's riding away and we'll be right back.
It needs to be the Eric Andre that's that style. Now this will tell me what version you've seen. When Juan goes in front of the firing squad, what does John whisper to him? Because on the original cut and the definitive cut, on the Blu-ray, he says short fuse, which makes sense because it's going to be a short fuse thing to, take out the troops. On the cut that I think is on the Leone set that you have, AJ, they just randomly put in "Duck, you sucker." It's just like,
Oh, yeah, okay. I was gonna bring that up. Okay, so short fuse makes sense because short fuse is what he says at the beginning. Because I love that moment when the explosives go off and he's not even phased. He just smiles. But yeah, I was gonna bring up that he does say "Duck, you sucker" in the firing squad scene. And the reason I like that was I feel like it was kind of the perfect use of because this version is titled "Duck, you sucker," that it was the use of the rule of three for the title drop, where he says it the first two times before, and it's like throws them off, and then the third time he says it, he actually ducks, and it like saves him essentially.
I think, well, considering like I never bothered to actually check because just to be really confusing, this is a 2-disc set. The first disc has a fistful of dynamite and Duck You Sucker. As in, that's what shows up at the end in terms of the titles. The second disc has the Italian Jeweler Testa version. Even though it's all not in Italian. Because when it was like, this is, original Italian audio available on the Italian version. I didn't have enough time to go through that, so. But like,
Which one's the predominant title on Tubi?
Actually, if I remember right, I think the title was "Duck You Sucker," and the poster said "A Fistful of Dynamite." So I think Tubi just covered both bases.
that's where the box is brilliant because it says "A Fistful of Dynamite, Duck You Sucker," except if you prefer the second disc and the Italian version, if I can get it out, can't get it out now. It's got a reversible cover, so it's also got jeweler test, so I can have all three. Just be really confused. Trying to see what else I've got in my notes. One of the other little tidbits which I found interesting, which again I guess appealed to his Italian audience. The scene where you get the deserter put in the firing squad and shot in the back because he's a deserter. He was purposefully chosen because he looked like Benito Mussolini. Which is like weird and ironic. Quickly to the comments. Bryce says, "Duck you sucker, you me bored me sucker, you sucker." Hang on, what? I'm trying to get. I'm guessing you found it boring. That's what I'm trying to guess. It's just the way it is. It sounds like it's me Tarzan, you Jane, which is a bit. I get what you're trying to say though. Josephine says, "Ducky Sucker sort of sounds like it could be a Bugs Bunny Daffy Duck movie." So again, fits into what we were saying. And then some trivia. Sergio was initially dissatisfied with Steiger's performance and that he played him seriously, and tensions rose, including an incident that ended with Steiger walking off during filming of the scene when the stagecoach gets destroyed. However, after the film was finished, Sergio and Rod were content with the final result, and Steiger was known to praise him for his skills as a director at various speeches and whatever. I mean, it was a very sort of clash of styles because Leone would have been used to sort of the what his vision was, because it was just, Clint did what he did, and Steiger's known for being very method. I think it was brought up, and I find it ironic that his previous role before this was as Napoleon in Waterloo, especially when one of the kids is called Napoleon. I don't know whether that was put there as an in-joke. Might have been.
It kind of sounds like they had something akin to the Burt Reynolds, Paul Thomas Anderson relationship a little bit, where it was all tension and then all the praise came afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, the studio was very heavily involved in it. I'll hold off on bringing it up, but film was initially planned to have been directed by Leone's assistant, but Rod and Coburn demanded that Sergio direct the picture, so Santi was out. Steiger had demanded that his scenes be filmed with natural sound if possible, which was virtually unheard of in Italian cinema and led to much tension between Steiger and the crew. The interesting result of that, which Josephine doesn't mention, apart from in action scenes, all the bits of Steiger's dialogue that you get, including that luncheon scene with all the fancy stuff, is live audio. It's not post-dubbed in. All of Coburn's stuff is, and everything that sort of, you can probably tell the big Johnny shout at the end was dubbed in. But yeah, as much as possible was the actual raw audio, which, whether that was what Sergio brought forward into Once Upon a Time in America 11 years later, Steiger made him better, I guess. I don't know. Clint was approached by Sergio for the role of Mallory, but saw it as just a different take of the same character he'd already played in the Dollars trilogy, and also wanted to end his association with the Italian film industry. As a result, he declined the offer and went in Hang 'em High instead.
It would have been an interesting, I guess, juxtaposition to The Man with No Name to see Eastwood ride into a Leone Western on a bike instead of a horse.
Despite the politically charged setting, the film was not intended as a political film. Leone himself said that the Mexican Revolution is only a symbol, not the real one. Which was sort of, in that respect itself, with the fact that the Irish IRA didn't exist for 6 or 7 years when the film was supposed to be set in 1913. It's not supposed to be historically accurate, like a fair few of the films around that time were sort of trying to be. Although a lot of them did have the trope of like an American helping out. Then again, I think that happened it happened in Godzilla, for God's sake. They took Godzilla and then, now let's get Ironside on it to like explain everything that's happening. Jason Robards has said that during the filming of Once Upon a Time in the West, Sergio approached Charles Bronson himself about starring in it, but only Leone wanted to call it Duck, You Asshole. And Robards said he'd never get away with a title like that in America. The interesting little tidbit regarding Robards, he was another one that was considered for the Mallory part, but didn't. And Eli Wallach was considered as one. But the studio wanted a bigger name star. And because of Steiger recently at the time getting the Oscar win for In the Heat of the Night, that's why they went with him. And Eli for quite a while was a little bit aggrieved at, what he could have done with that role. which I guess would then be more akin with the Dollars trilogy, because you always had characters carry over from one film into the other.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the actor that was in 1 and 2 off the top of my head. I know it was Lee Van Cleef in 2 and 3, and then it would have been Wallach in 3 and 4, I guess. Leone showed the prints to the DP, Giuseppe Rosioni, in order to get lighting and colour effects he wanted. That is one nice little bit with the explosion at the end that just holds until every single tiny little bit of colour from whatever the fumes were from the explosion just disappears. It's weird, but awesome. With the Black Panther movement in full swing and riots taking place in Paris, the late 60s was a period of revolution. Sergio wrote Dr. Villegas specifically for his friend Romulo Valli and made the character a physician because Valli had studied medicine before becoming an actor. Wait, so could he have actually cut that person up? I'm intrigued. Steiger and Coburn both died in 2002 within 4 months of each other. Rod Steiger's kill count 37, James Coburn 123. There it is.
You mean just in this movie?
Yeah. I don't know how you can take into account how many people got killed from the machine guns, especially when half the time Wham wasn't even touching it. It was just like, oh god, oh.
And since they orchestrated it, does the train collision count as a kill? That's a pretty hefty number.
I mean, would that be the doctor because he was actively behind the wheel? He's also partly to be responsible. I don't know. Apparently, in one of the cuts as well, in that flashback to the IRA shooting bit, you know, when the 2 British Army soldiers get shot, they cut it in such a way that this gun that fires 1 shot at a time shoots 2 army soldiers at the same time. I guess just to make it shorter, but at the same time, I guess nobody was paying attention. And yeah, I can't believe it. It's taken me this long, and Josie's comment to go, what an incredible score from Morricone. Especially when you take into account, I think, from what Christopher was saying on the commentary, at this point, Morricone was doing 25 films a year in terms of scoring.
Jesus.
And he was still able to do something like this, and the Sean that you get is specifically because it's John's theme, thinking back to his days with Sean, which I always thought I always got confused with that, because I thought his name was Sean, but he gave a pseudonym of John. But in reality, it was just him thinking back to his time with Sean and whatever the woman's first name was, because I don't think it's in the script or anything. I think it's just
I mean, the woman could have been Sean.
Well, because to be fair, it was a very sort of bro thing, though, wasn't it? It was part of the time. It was like, is Coburn really into the woman, or is he more into Sean? Because it seems like that much of a tight knit friendship. You know, he didn't want to shoot him in the pub, but he was a snitch, so bang. And even Sean was sort of accepting of it, as if he understood, sort of thing. And apparently, the Sean stuff in the soundtrack was at the suggestion of Sergio's wife Carla, who thought it was better than doing all the wah wah and the weird sounds that you get with Juan or pretty much anything else in Leone's westerns.
Yeah, I was trying to. I wasn't sure if this was the exact word I was looking for, but I wanted to say this score felt more modern than the other ones that he's done for Leone. At least in some instances.
Yeah. Apparently, it went into sort of like the composition of the themes as well, because Juan's were very sort of like farty and sort of like guttural sort of noises, like a stomach going with that, and then like the bassoon and whatever, and then a lot of the sort of whistling and the sort of somewhat etherealness, which, considering the way he's introduced as sort of like this magic guy that comes in on his bike and whatever. And it literally has a bit when he's there with his hands out with his nitroglycerin, and all Juan sees in his head is like Bank of Massa Verde above his head, practically like a halo. Like, the saint has been sent down. Morricone himself has said in interviews the chants do not represent the names of the characters, but are just part of the soundscape, like the chants. And apparently that was an aspect that Morricone brought into as well, influenced by John Cage and the infamous 4 minutes 33 seconds, where the soundtrack is just everybody in the auditorium breathing or turning pages, because he's just there like pretending to play on the piano, and the whole idea is just let the natural sound come in. I think that the bit was mentioned in the commentary is when the Mexican troops are coming down to the bridge. There is little to no score on that bit. He just lets the sort of natural sounds basically influence the style of music that he puts on. So it's like you barely notice it. I don't know if we really got that to some extent from Morricone stuff after this. Really. Ending theory. Coburn's character's ghost snatches his ghost love from the ghost of his former best friend. I don't know. It seemed to be more like Coburn letting it go, sort of thing. James Coburn was Mr. Waternoose in Monsters Inc.
I believe. Actually, that's not. I was gonna say I think that was my introduction to him. My introduction to him might have been The Nutty Professor, then Monsters Inc. then Snow Dogs.
Yeah, like some of the stuff he made at his end of career was like, wow.
And when I realized he had a whole long spanning career, that opened up a lot of doors. Especially eye opening in The Last of Sheila. Not a way I expected to see him, but I love that we're not even mentioning Affliction, his Oscar win.
The first time I remember him being brought up was Austin Powers 2. When it's like, hey, In Like Flint's on the I thought In Like Flint was like a joke thing, and then like looked into it and like, no, it's real. And it's hard to get on DVD because they barely did any prints. I've got both of them on a triple set randomly with Funeral in Berlin, because that fits, I guess.
I have a DVD of In Like Flint, and did you notice that joke in Austin Powers, by the way? That it's the second Austin Powers movie, and he says In Like Flint is his favorite movie, and In Like Flint is actually the sequel movie to Our Man Flint, so it's
Yeah.
also the second one in its franchise.
At the time of his death, Coburn was at home listening to music and playing his flute. Like a true Irishman. Now we need him with Brendan Gleeson on the fiddle from Banshees. That's a band. Now Josephine's got a Coburn versus Steiger face-off. Oh, hold on. Jesus. The bot's back. Damn it.
Oh wow, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. Hide user on this channel. And then they all disappear. So the Coburn Steiger face-off. In the heat of the night or in like Flint?
In the heat of the night.
Yeah. Has to be in the heat of the night. Chris?
I haven't seen a lot of either one of their movies, so I probably won't have answers to most of these.
Okay. I mean, you might have an answer to this one. Nutty Professor or Carpool?
I haven't seen Carpool.
I completely forgot that Rod Steiger's in Carpool.
Yeah, I was just about to ask about that. It's like he is. I don't really remember that. I mean, The Nutty Professor's the better movie, obviously.
The Muppets movie or Mars Attacks? I'd probably just about edge it to Mars Attacks.
I would say which is this the original Muppet movie we're talking about?
I think Steiger was in that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Steiger's in it.
I think Coburn's in it because Steiger would be in Mars Attacks in this case.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think I remember. I remember Coburn being in the Muppet movie, but I can't place the actual visual in my head. I would probably say the Muppet movie is just kind of like objectively better, but Mars Attacks is obviously a lot of fun.
I'll say the same thing. Muppet movie's probably the better movie, but Mars Attacks is fun. Especially Rod Steiger's fate.
Charade or On the Waterfront?
Oh damn, that's a tough one. Charade is more my kind of movie, but I've definitely seen On the Waterfront more times. That's really hard. I'd probably have to say On the Waterfront, but that's tough.
I'd probably just edge it to Waterfront as well. But yeah, they're both really solid. The Great Escape or Dr. Zhivago? Oh.
I'd probably give a slight edge to The Great Escape, but I actually just rewatched Dr. Zhivago like a couple of years ago and I was surprised how into it I was because I didn't really have much of a memory of it from the first viewing, but yeah, it is really good. It's just very, very long.
Yeah. I'd probably just about give it to Great Escape. But again, that's another one that's close. This one won't be because I don't know either of these films. Deadfall or Pool Hall Junkies?
Wow, I have seen both of those. Deadfall is the one with the really, really, like, I don't want to say insane Nicolas Cage performance because that's obviously so many, but I mean a particular level of crazy Nicolas Cage performance. That's the one that Coburn is in. And probably my choice. Pool Hall Junkies is this Mars Callahan movie that had like Christopher Walken and Michael Rosenbaum, and it was like this little sort of crime thing, if I remember correctly. Deadfall's a lot more memorable, so that's what I would say.
I guess Affliction would be a good one to partner with, I don't know, the Pawnbroker. If you wanted to do a head-to-head with them two. And then I'm trying to think, what horror films did Coburn do? If any. Because I was thinking of something to partner with Steiger's End of Days, because it's probably one of the only good bits of that film.
Oh man, I really don't remember. I do want it doesn't fit this conversation, but I also wanted to shout out I think it's called The Americanization of Emily is a Coburn performance that always really stood out to me as well. That he's like kind of a supporting part in.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the Last of Sheila is probably the closest he got to horror, I want to say.
Yeah.
Where it'd fall into like the thriller territory, but still.
Although they didn't work together until '64 as children, Leone and Morricone were classmates. Jeez. It's a small world after all. Leone's favourite movies were reportedly in no particular order: Yojimbo, Warlock, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, High Noon, Shane, and Vera Cruz.
Well, Yojimbo makes a lot of sense, obviously.
Leone feuded with Bogdanovich over the directing reins of Dokusaka. Leone claimed that Bogdanovich was fearful of such a large production and backed out the last minute. Bogdanovich stands by the story that Leone hired him as a patsy as he wanted to direct the film all along. So maybe they didn't get... Maybe it wasn't just the title that caused a friendship end. Oh, Morricone composition face-off. No, not a battle, but the compositions themselves, but rather the... Okay, not a battle between the musical compositions, but rather than the movies. So we've got Bird with the Crystal Plumage or The Thing. That's tough.
I might have to go Bird with Crystal Plumage on that. I know it's probably sacrilege, but I'm all about a good slasher movie.
I mean, they are pretty similar. Thing is just like a different style of slasher, really. Argento's it was Argento, wasn't it? Bird Crystal Plumage.
Yeah.
I just remember I got it for $2.99. It was randomly on sale a few months back on Amazon. I was like, yes. U-Turn or Mission to Mars. He did the soundtrack to that shit.
I would say apparently Mission to Mars was this misunderstood masterpiece at the time, from what I'm hearing. I have not rewatched it, so right now I would say U-Turn, but I'm curious to go back to Mission to Mars.
In the Line of Fire or Frantic?
In Line of Fire.
I'd probably go with In the Line of Fire as well.
In the Line of Fire. Finally, two that I've seen.
You haven't seen Mission to Mars, even though it's based... I was today years old when I found out that is a theme park adaptation from Disney. Jeez.
Oh man! So when everybody's praising Pirates of the Caribbean, we have to say Mission to Mars got there first.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm looking at Disney theme park adaptations. You've got Tower of Terror from '97, which was a made-for-TV, but Mission to Mars was a couple of years ahead of the Country Bears thing, and then Haunted Mansion.
I forgot the Country Bears to even be considered there. What is this timeline? I tell you, whatever timeline we're in just gets weirder and weirder.
Untouchables or Bugsy?
Untouchables.
What are you prepared to do?
Yeah, Bugsy is definitely due for a rewatch, but and this is so unfair because I've rewatched The Untouchables recently. But right now, I would say The Untouchable.
Wolf or Disclosure?
Well,
Disclo- Disclosure being the Barry Levinson film, apparently.
I assume so. The one that's not Fatal Attraction, but there was like a billion of those at one time.
Yeah, the Demi Moore, Michael Douglas thing. Yeah, I'll probably just about edge it to Wolf. Uh, Jimmy Blaze is in the chat. Hello there, Jimmy. Antoine St. John, who I think played a general in this, was the painter Svik in Lucio Fulci's The Beyond. Uh, good to see Lucio Fulci made use of some people rather than all his other. Did he just take over from Leone and like making exploitation films in Italy?
I
Even
just
though,
saw. Speaking of Fulci, I just saw A Cat in the Brain recently, like for the first time recently, and I feel like Fulci's one of the only directors that can consistently make me lightheaded. Like like just based on the style and the gore and all that. It's insane.
personally, I think this is Leone's worst film, but even so Leone is better than no Leone.
Yeah,
Um,
I haven't seen the first one, but that's pretty much exactly how I feel. Where it was like where we were talking about how this one almost just feels so different stylistically, but also still so much him. But yeah, it does feel like a step down from like the other ones Once Upon a Time movies and the Dollars trilogy and stuff like that.
yeah, Jimmy ranks his top three as Good, the Bad, and the Ugly at number one, Once Upon a Time in the West at number two, and Once Upon a Time in America at number three, with honorable mention MVP being for a few dollars more.
Yeah, for the longest time, I called it for a few dollars more my favorite, but uh, it's really hard. It's like they're all of those first four and America are all top tier.
Bryce says, I don't know what to say with the movie. I don't know if I wasted 2.5 hours with this or 3 hours with Cloud Atlas. Well, I appreciate that not everybody is going to like, everything. The only thing I ask is you like Who Killed Captain Alex, and then we're good. That's all I care. That is the film I'll take to my grave. All the commandos.
If
The
there's
movies are.
anybody out there, if there's anybody out there that didn't enjoy Who Killed Captain Alex, I don't think I want to meet that person. I feel like I feel like they're just soulless.
Jimmy saying that I like Cloud Atlas. Its premise is horseshit, but it's executed brilliantly, and I wanted to believe in its crazy reincarnation theories. Then back on to. I remember being super excited for Fistful of Dynamite, what it was called on TV when I watched it, and being so disappointed. The trappings of Leone were there, but something was missing. And then in terms of the list, Charade over Waterfront. Waterfront has the great scene with Brando and Steiger, but Charade's excellent from start to finish. Thing over Bird with the crystal plumage. Bird is great, but Argento topped it, whereas The Thing is easily in Carpenter's top tier. Argento's done better. U-turn over Mission to Mars. Mission to Mars sucks. You see, Disney? Sucks. Frantic over In the Line of Fire for me. Both great, but that's my choice. And Untouchables over Bugsy. Bugsy is way too mainstream and conventional. That's why it won all the Oscars, damn it. I'm trying to see if there's anything else in my notes. I don't think there is. No, everything got covered. Yeah, everything actually got covered. I can put that over there and rest. So, final thoughts. I'll start with you, Chris, given that it was your. I guess, no, was it both really your first times watching it?
Yeah, this was his Leone introduction entirely.
Oh, right. Well, we'll start with that in terms of. Does it make you want to look at the other westerns from Leone, Chris?
I mean, I did like the movie. I thought I would have trouble getting into it, but I really didn't. I was pretty hooked from the off, which I thought was really strange. Um, but I thought it was fine. I enjoyed it.
I'm really curious how you'd react to the
I
Dollar
think
trilogy. And
Steiger crushed it.
Yeah. The only thing you need to know of note about Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Chris, is the big scene with the bridge being exploded with the dynamite. They had to do 2 takes of, because one of the stagehands pushed the button too early because he misread like signs to say "bright go." So they had to reconstruct the bridge and then do it all again.
I wonder how that dude's career ended up. Like, I wonder if, like, years later he was sitting in a bar somewhere telling that story and was like, "Yeah, I was the guy that blew the load early."
With all the stuff, he imagined that he was at the bottom of the bridge when it got. Apparently, those gun turrets, or the areas where the gun turrets are in Dynamite, are still there if you wanted to visit them today, in that valley. I don't know whether the guns are still there, but certainly the area sort of is like it's been preserved, and nobody's dared touch it for the past 50 years. Yeah, AJ, your final thoughts.
yeah, I found myself getting more into it as it went, and I did feel like it kind of took some getting used to, that it didn't feel like a traditional Leone movie where, like I said, a lot, it feels like most of Leone's movies are really built on like tension and suspense and stuff like that, and like all the build up. But I found it more of appreciation also as we talked about it, where you guys brought up points that I wasn't really thinking about, as far as like, how layered it can go as far as what its point is or what its idea is. But yeah, because usually when I start a western, I'm usually looking at it in like the simplest terms, but I also feel like that's probably how westerns are kind of best suited, the more simple they are. But I can really appreciate what's here. But and yeah, I was surprised by how action oriented it was compared to the usual suspense and build up that Leone's usually known for. But yeah, I could definitely see myself coming back to this though.
It's something that I. It's interesting that I reveal the origin story, like only at the end. I only picked it up because it was part of like a free. I know it was free for 2. It was free for so many pound, multi buy at HMV, and I think at the time I was allowed. I was probably like 12 or 13, but I was, as long as I gave it to the parents, they could get it for me. So the ones that I went for was Fistful of Dollars, a few dollars more, and Fistful of Dynamite, because that's what I thought it was related. So I guess technically it was, because they're all by Leone. Because I think at the time, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was an 18. I think now it's been reclassified to a 15. Which, when you look at some of the violence in that compared to the violence in Fistful of Dynamite, it's probably about akin, I would say. If not like more dead people. Probably.
Yeah,
Maybe
the firing squad scenes in this one are pretty brutal.
Yeah. And that's a 15. Oh, hold on. The bot's back. So yeah, I only sort of found it through that way, and it.
Of course, we're not live now. I'm on a roll.
Oh, I see. It's in another tab. That's why. I've got chat open twice. That's why. It all went weird because I lost internet connection for whatever reason. Apologies, everybody. Although, as they see it, it will just sort of be like a blip in time. So, for all we know, this is where we had the 4-minute dream sequence of James Coburn. It all got cut. You never saw it. But yeah, I mean, as I say, I don't think it's as good as the rest of Leone's stuff, but I do feel sort of pleased that I got it because I had to pay like 15 or 16 pound for the Blu-ray edition, but it's got me interested in, at least as if they come on sale and whatever, getting the rest of them possibly in the range, considering that is 219, so there must be 218 better films or something. I'll find out, and then like 220 is Casablanca, and it's like shit. But yeah, it's just something that I wanted to touch on because obviously the Dollars trilogy. I think every other Leone film, maybe bar the Rhodes one, has been covered on the channel. Certainly the Dollars trilogy has. And I'd have thought both Once Upon a Times have.
America hasn't, and I've only touched on West when we did our top villains video where Fonda made my list. But I talked about the movie for quite a bit there, but it was only about the Fonda scene, so it's due for like a full review of sorts.
Yeah.
I thought, isn't Once Upon a Time in America the one with Donald Sutherland that you put on the villains list, or is that a different movie?
That was 1900.
1900. I don't know why I got those two confused.
Yeah, because 1900 has nothing to do with America, so I'm not sure.
Probably the same reason that if you hadn't told me it was a Leone movie, I would have assumed Duck You Sucker was a blaxploitation movie.
Yeah. I wonder if you're thinking of 1900 because of the length. Even though I believe 1900 is still pretty 1900 is still longer than the longest cut of Once Upon a Time in America.
The only thing I do find weird is that we still haven't got an actual like digital release for this thing, at least in the UK. I mean, you can if you have an MGM subscription, but considering Amazon now owns MGM, you'd have thought it'd just be like on Amazon Prime, but it isn't. So I don't think there'd be any rights issues with it. I'd have thought, because it's got the lion on it. But anyway, oh, Jimmy is still here. As you said, I compared this one to Cat and Nine Tails by Argento. Just really a disappointing dead spot, but you still get the credit from watching it. I'd say that's probably fair.
Yeah, Cat and Nine Tails is very well known.
Yeah, I think that's where we got cut off, because I was asking about Colossus of Rhodes sort of being. It feels like he did like 5 or 6 films over like 6 or 7 years, and then took 10. It's sort of like Cameron and Avatar. He makes loads of films and then takes a long time to make his magnum opus. Except the bot's back. Except, there wasn't a Once Upon a Time in America 2. the way of
3, 4, 5.
Yeah, or even that far. Dear God. So yeah, that is all for this episode of the Popcast Movie Club. We'll be back in 2 weeks although Chris won't, to discuss his pick of Friday Night Lights.
Which, unfortunately, I found out is not streaming anywhere for free. I apologize about that.
Well, I mean, it's not legally streaming anywhere for free.
True.
It's probably somewhere on the internet. I don't know. Jimmy's got a good... Yeah, Once Upon a Time in America 2, Revenge of Noodles. There we go. Thankfully, Noodles was referenced a lot of times in the commentary, so I'm not just thinking it's just like a pot noodle that's come to life in like some weird sort of elsewhere sort of thing. Especially if it's especially when we just talked about a film that just starts with pissing. So yeah, in terms of other stuff here on the network coming up, the big thing is the Oscar reactions. It might be live from me, as in I might set a stream up, so keep an eye out on my Twitter at AshIsMyNameUK. I'll probably tweet out from there if I am going to go live. Owen and AJ will be recording their live reactions and then uploading them to the channel. And then we'll have a full-on discussion of it tentatively around 6 or 7 tomorrow. Owen will probably give you the times on Twitter, so then I can, if I have to, adjust the starting time at the stream where need be. And then the next time we'll be back in anger for stuff will probably be in a couple of weeks when we get round to Q&A session and talking Friday Night Lights. And then we've also got to fit in Guild Talk, BAFTA predictions between now and at least a month's time when my pick comes round again. So yeah, just to clarify, Friday Night Lights, the 2004 film, is the next one for those of you putting your notes down as what you need to watch or get from Redbox, or it's probably cheap somewhere. I know with some of these films it's like they're in the pound bin because too many came out on DVD and the shops just want to get rid of them from the second-hand places. To be fair, I've seen a lot of copies of Friday Night Lights.
You should have seen the wall of Matrix Reloaded that existed at a thrift store local to AJ not too long ago.
That don't surprise me either.
They couldn't give away the Matrix Reloaded that day.
AJ's got movie reviews and everything coming up. I'm trying to think what the big release is this weekend for you.
Is oh god, I haven't been keeping up with 2023 yet. I haven't even seen Megan yet.
Oh, so at least we've got that one to catch up on.
That and Missing are the ones I really want to get to.
What I find astonishing is my art house cinema and my local cinema, which normally doesn't really care for sort of blockbuster stuff, is doing like 3 or 4 showings of Fabelmans a day. But the big multiplex, you know, that's got 13 screens and everything, has more showings of Plane with Gerard Butler than the Fabelmans. Whether that's just because of the one BAFTA thing and they've given up on it, which is a bit depressing. Oh wow, there pretty much is nothing coming out this week. Netflix, save us if there is something. So yeah, AJ's got a lot of stuff. The Versus is a lot of stuff with that as well. Owen has Sip and Snacks and Voice of Liberty content in the archive that will be coming some point, as are my snack stashes. Game of Ash content probably coming soon. Chris, I'll let you promote your Instagram and your podcast.
Instagram, Chris Hunt's Toys, Twitch, Chris Hunt's Toys, podcast on YouTube and all your major podcast carriers at Figures and Flippy S. Actually, I think on the audio, it's Figures and Flippy Shit Wrestling Podcast. So we will be doing a show on Saturday for the Royal Rumble, or I'm sorry, for the Weekend Wrestling with Royal Rumble predictions, a Royal Rumble video on Sunday, and then we won't have another video until we return from the Jericho Cruise, but we will be doing a video on the Jericho Cruise. So if you want to figure out what happened, what the experience was, you can tune in and catch that video and see if the Jericho Cruise is something that you want to do in the future.
Raw is XXX, and people think it's a porno.
And then at some point on Twitch, me and AJ will get together and we will schedule our run through of the original trilogy of Mario Party on Twitch.
AJ, just like Keith Richards, cannot be killed by conventional weapons, but unlike Keith Richards, isn't on social media. Although I'm guessing Keith Richards doesn't actually tweet it himself. Somebody does it for him. Like most people do. Thank you to Josie, to Bry, and Jimmy. Briefly saying, never seen Friday Night Lights, but if I can check it out, I'll be here. Thanks for the awesome content, guys. This channel is the shit. We start with piss and we end with shit. On that bombshell. That's all we've got to say about that.